drive home.
Somebody needs to take the hammer away from this lady.
I'm going to say she's not shy about the hammer. Like,
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. And would like to recognize that collectively we're on the unceded territories of all of the First Nations within our regional boundaries. And we have Chair Jen Ford en route to the meeting. And I believe we'll have some other directors joining us shortly. And here comes Karen Elliott, and I see Jack Crompton online and Sal Demare. Okay, good. So a motion to approve the agenda. Do I need to make those changes? Okay. Under 5, we're going to delete that as a delegation as item 5, and we have Sue Maxwell here, and she'll be presenting underneath 6.2. So with that change, I'd ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Weed. Thank you. Anyone opposed? Motion carried. And now item number 3, regional moment, Area C, over to Director Mack.
Thank you very much. So with Area C, there's, like I said, just a very exciting time throughout all of Area C, but in the Pemberton Valley, there's farming going on full speed ahead everywhere. This is just a wonderful year for people doing hay. And sadly enough, there's a couple of the larger farms are not doing potatoes this year, seed potatoes. One in particular, they've been doing it for 5 generations, and now they're just strictly doing hay. And I think that's a lot to do with just the cost of farming. Fuel is so expensive, fertilizer, just on, equipment. And that's really sad to see. And also I've noticed there's quite a bit of farmland for sale. Some that are fully operational farms, and then other just bare farmland. And the prices per acre are just amazing, 40 to 50,000 an acre. And I don't know how anybody could ever think of buying that land and becoming a farmer, right? So anyways, that's not a good thing. All our campsites in the area are booked solid, they're just full, as I'm sure yours are. Anderson Lake Boat Launch is being used really extensively by people from the Lower Mainland, Squamish, Whistler, Pemberton. So that's a beautiful lake, and everybody's taking advantage of it. And sadly, the gas station, the Quatquas gas station and little store, they've closed it. Actually, they closed it in April, which is really tragic to me because it was a real resource. People could go there, buy their fuel. People going with boats up there. You want to go get milk, do whatever. It was just a real convenience to have it there. Sadly, it's closed, but maybe it'll, reopen sometime in the future. There's new construction going on everywhere. Lots of construction going on. Now we get to Neff Creek, which we had overflow.
Oh, interrupt me for 1 second, Russell, just because Chair Ford is here. So just take one brief pause.
Hi, how are you? Okay, so, yeah, Neff Creek, it overflowed and cut Darcy off for, well, 24 hours, shall we say. And it overflowed again, not to the extent that it did last time. We never got cut off, but there was some damage to the shoulders and whatnot. They've got it cleared out now, but I checked and it's all full again. So there's so much material up top to come down because the glacier's gone. So it used to protect everything and now it's all bare. And so we get a rain event or when the snow, we had those 2 hot days in the last, say a week and a half ago. And those 2 days were enough to bring a lot of material down. Adjacent Creek, we're, as CEO mentioned yesterday, we're working on that. So that's interesting. Hopefully that'll work out. I went the other day, as Mayor Richmond said, to the grand opening of our new bike skills park at Dendoff Park. It was excellent. And the new soccer fields, yeah, that's a really great asset for the community. And you know, it was a good relationship between the village and the regional district, you know, partnered on that, which is really good. Yeah, the only thing I keep pushing the mayor is we need a ballpark. That's the next thing. We've got 2 soccer fields now, the bike skills park, and I'd like to see a really nice ball diamond put in there. So that'll happen. And to finish off, our slow food cycle is going to be on August the 21st. And that's a huge event and very well attended. Another one is the Pemberton Barn Dance, and that's going to be back after the 2 years of COVID. So that's on September the 17th. And that's a really good event too. That's just a fundraiser for the Lions and a Rotary. So that's a really good event to take in. And that's it for this time. Thank you.
Very good.
Nat Bailey, Pemberton.
Okay,
Nat Bailey, Pemberton.
that's it. That's what we need. Yeah.
Well, it could be the Russ Max Day.
Even better.
I saw a post somewhere last night about flood warning or something in the Pemberton area. Is that
Yeah, I like,
area C or in
well,
area?
that's just the River Forecast Center is projecting high water. I noticed this morning it's at our gauge, it's about 2 meters. So, yeah, the Diking District, they're on top of this all the time. So they follow what the River Center says, but I know that they monitor it continuously.
I was just a little worried about Vivian and her.
Yeah, no, it'll all be good. The majority of the snowpack is gone now, so the water's probably going to stay high as long as it's warm.
You could always go home.
I'm sure it will be good.
I don't think we have enough charge to them.
This conversation, that's a very nice presentation. Thank
It
you.
was lovely. I just was wondering if the flood warning was in.
You'll get home.
Okay.
Any concerns about flooding, Rusty will give you my card. You just give me a call.
Thank you, Area C, for that reach.
That's it.
Appreciate that. That's
You're
great.
very welcome.
So we're moving along to delegation?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, if you could turn it over to Ms. Belsham, she'll
Yes.
delegation be part of that.
Oh, sorry, 6.1.
6 point.
Nothing today, Jane.
And
Nothing today.
cancel
Okay.
the no closed.
All right. And Director Belsham. And Ms. LeBlanc?
Yes. Thank you very much. Good morning. So I'm Resource Recovery Coordinator for the SRD. We're here today to present you with the report in regards of the illegal dumping strategy and action plan. That was part of the Solid Waste and Resource Management Plan adopted in 2016 by the board and approved by the ministry in 2019. So I'm not going to take too much of of this time, but we have Sue Maxwell, and we also have joining us virtually, Tamara Shulman. So I will let them speak to the illegal dumping reports.
Thank you. And we have a presentation that I think Natalie will just put up. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you about this. I know it's long been an area of concern here. So what I want to do, once I figure out how to use the remote.
Or does Natalie drive for you?
There's a on-off switch.
Okay.
Oh, there's a on-off switch. On this side, there we go. That would be helpful. Thank you.
All right.
So, oh, there we go. So basically, just wanting to define illegal dumping. We called it, or we used the definition used by the Indigenous Zero Waste Technical Advisory Group of deliberately abandoned, sorry, there's a little bit of a delay, deliberately abandoned or dumped waste in an unauthorized location. So litter was mentioned several times, but we did not include that in this. Where I'm going to have this go is take a look at the context, the process that we've used, the impacts, and look at what, where, and why, as well as roles, and then the strategies and actions, and how to implement them.
Even better.
Thank you. Just need to wait for it. Thanks. So the context is there's several provincial acts that make it illegal. There's also aspects in the SLRD bylaws for waste facilities, as well as similar bylaws for Whistler and Squamish. But there isn't a specific bylaw dealing with illegal waste. There's no formal process right now for handling, nor budget for handling illegal dumping. So it's sort of dealt with on an ad hoc basis. And I know several of the electoral areas directors have been approached for funds depending on things in their areas. There is an SLRD webpage. The SLRD has been working on cleanups along with other partners, signage, disposal options, and there's a bylaw officer. There is a provincial report all polluters and poachers line. However, there's not necessarily enough staff to be able to provide the information back to local regional districts. It is a problem across BC. This is not the only regional district dealing with it, and it's not fully the SLRD's responsibility. There's multiple groups that would have a role in it. Other parties have resources to deal with it, but everybody's resources are limited. So what we did was do a literature review of best practices. My colleague on the line here, Tamara, she surveyed other regional districts and did interviews with the key ones who are doing a lot of work on this area. And then I interviewed over 30 local organizations, including many of the electoral area representatives, and sent surveys to another 50. And so the impacts, people were worried about the impact on the environment or wildlife. They were worried about it detracting from their outdoor recreation experience, as well as the impacts on tourism. There was a fire risk. And when illegal dumping starts, sometimes it will add, so it'll draw more illegal dumping. And the kinds of materials that are out there you're probably familiar with: mattresses and box springs, yard waste, furniture, construction and demolition materials, just household waste in bags, sometimes abandoned vehicles and campers and RVs, things like that, as well as large appliances, tires, metal, TVs, all of those sorts of things. And when we took a look at where, and we developed a map that we've shared with SLRD staff, we found that in general, it was places that were accessible. So they're not that far away from the main highway or a road. People wanted places where there was little chance of being seen while they're dropping it off their materials. Or there might have been a history of dumping in the area. It's a closed landfill, or it used to be a community waste location, and also associated with camping or squatting, especially in some of the northern parts. You can kind of see it's all throughout the SLRD. And when we ask the people why, so keep in mind, this is not us asking the people who are actually doing the illegal dumping, but asking the people associated with it what they thought. The one thing that was a bit of an exception is yard waste. People might not consider yard waste to be illegal dumping because they kind of see it's like, oh, we're just putting it back in nature. But for other ones, it might be lack of knowledge of options, convenience. People mentioned cost, but in talking with the other regional districts and even locally, people would sometimes see a little bit of a blip when tipping fees were raised, but it's happening also in regional districts where there's no tipping fees and there's no direct link long-term. So we're wondering if perhaps it's more linked with the capacity of people because it's often associated with of the people who have been fined or caught. They might be challenged with mental health or addiction issues, or they might be experiencing homelessness. So correct disposal of waste might not be at the top of their priority, and they might not necessarily be in a great place to do those things. So often that is associated with lower income or challenges. So that's where the cost part might come in as well. And when we asked people why illegal dumping wouldn't happen, it was a lot about respect for the environment, caring for the community. In terms of roles, lots of different organizations have roles in it. So the Conservation Officer Service and the Natural Resource Officers get the reports from the RAP line. They have the ability to enforce illegal dumping. However, they don't have enough resources to handle all of the things in our area, which means that they end up prioritizing it based on, is it going to harm wildlife? Is there oil leaking into a fish-bearing stream? Those sorts of things. BC Parks will clean up some of the stuff in their areas. Rec sites and trails will clean up stuff in their areas. Municipalities and First Nations also are doing parts in localized spots. But we're also finding that tenure holders have been involved. Community groups like Pemberton Wildlife Association have partnered to do cleanups. There's citizens who are cleaning things up as well. And so when we developed the strategies and actions, we really thought that it was about having a coalition of everybody doing the little pieces that they can do together, but having it done in a coordinated fashion. So these actions are for the coalition, not necessarily all just for the SLRD. But we thought make it easier to dispose properly. So addressing gaps in disposal options, promoting the free or low cost options for commonly dumped materials. It's already free to drop off tires, TVs, and other things. So promoting those. Make it harder to illegally dump. Making illegal dumping feel more visible. So this sign here, pictured just near the Green River site after a cleanup that Pemberton Wildlife Association did in partnership with the SLRD was very effective because it's like, oh, there's cameras in the area. People thought, oh, I'm not going to come back. And neighbors were engaged. So they started to report if a truck went in empty and then came back, or went in full and came back empty. Controlling access to hotspots as much as is reasonable, and consider requirements for permits and businesses in terms of this could be perhaps a municipal role. Providing information when they're asking for business licenses, maybe asking for evidence of tipping fees for perhaps the landscaping businesses or small renovation companies. Communication will be key. So developing a communications action plan that's specific to this using the tools that the SLRD already has. Providing information on existing disposal options, showing how to report incidents of illegal dumping, and highlighting the risks of dumping yard waste, because that one in particular was something that was a bit of an outlier, and particularly in terms of fire hazards around our area, that'll be important. Conducting targeted outreach campaigns, building on things that the SLRD is already doing, such as communications around when people change their tires seasonally, about how to dispose of tires they don't want. And signage, not just in terms of telling people that you're not allowed to legally dump, because people really know that, but in terms of letting them know after an area has been cleaned up that there might be cameras there put up by partner groups, and that the community cared about it. There's a small percentage of people that might almost illegally dump as a bit of a protest, saying, well, I don't want to listen to your government rules. So when you say that the community is also supporting it and has helped to do a cleanup, that can help to drive behavior change. So partnering will be really key. The SLRD could coordinate a coalition, and of the people that I interviewed, all were interested in participating as much as their time would allow. Working with other regional districts who are already developing things, so no need to reinvent the wheel, but collaboration to use some of their tools could be good. Working with the province and extended producer responsibility program, so the province has already heard we need a mattress recycling program, and they're going to bring that in. But other information in terms of also the demand in our region for the CO service and the NROs and others can be roles that the province can play. Facilitating cleanups, having dedicated SLRD support, having a protocol so it doesn't have to be done on an ad hoc basis, considering and developing a protocol for when to waive tipping fees. They are already waived for SLRD facilities, but not yet, or not for the Whistler facility, but it's also for which groups, when, what protocols need to be followed. And support local groups partnering to do the cleanups or provide the manpower, and also show the local concern for their area. And we did have some local groups volunteering to do that as well. Monitoring, so develop a reporting system that could feed into the RAP system so that there would be local information and coordination. Develop a tracking and mapping system, and this is similar to what Comox Valley has done. Track the costs, monitor known sites, and of course enforcement in terms of having a specific bylaw, which Comox Valley did with a ticketing system, so it was much more easy to implement and enforce. Dedicated support for enforcement, working together to provide more coverage. A lot of the groups are already going up and down a bunch of the Forest Service roads and other places, so there's no need for everybody to go there if it was coordinated. Making enforcement visible, not necessarily naming people, but showing that it does have consequences. And even if it couldn't be enforced, if there's somebody's name or address or something in the waste, often people, if by contacting them, they'll be like, ooh, my waste disposal system didn't work. Or if I did it directly, I would be like, I won't do that again because somebody knows it's my stuff that's there. So implementation, we're recommending existing staff plus 0.5 of an FTE. This is similar to Comox Valley, which has a bigger population, but a far smaller geographic area and way fewer visitors. And then some additional specific costs for particular items that are noted in the plan. There's a time frame. Of course, with all plans, you want to have evaluation to see if it's working and what to tweak. I know it's in your package, so we'll just open it up for questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? I'm sure we have lots of questions. Anyone? Anyone on the screen? Jenna? Yeah, go ahead, Jenna.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and through the chair, a very interesting and thorough report. Thank you for all the work. I think this is a really challenging one because, as you mentioned, like there's no silver bullet, it's extended everywhere, it's multi-jurisdictional. And so, although I appreciate kind of the next steps, do you think that can you like prioritize them for me in terms of like, do you see one or two as being like the most impactful if we have limited resources?
Sure, I think for sure the coalition, like there's so many little parts of resources that are available for each organization that I think the coalition coordinating that could really leverage some community resources in terms of volunteer groups that want to help, as well as just by having more of those conversations that will raise the awareness, I think, within the community. I also think having a bylaw that's easy to enforce would be extremely helpful, but I'll also just check and see if I'm missing anything else tomorrow.
Yes, that definitely aligns with what I'm thinking, and figuring out how to have those partnerships even beyond the volunteer organizations, right, with some of the other entities that Sue mentioned.
Thank you, that's helpful. And then my other question was going to be around the note that you made around the linkage but with tipping fees. And I know that this is something that comes up around this table a lot, as well as in the district of Squamish. And I was fortunate to be in a session that was partly facilitated by you yesterday, Sue. Squamish is updating their zero waste action plan. And this idea came up of people trying to like circumvent either through illegal dumping or bring their material elsewhere to avoid tipping fees. And so I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more on the research there around the correlation between tipping fees, illegal dumping, or the lack thereof of a correlation.
Sure, I'll just mention briefly, I think the issue that came up yesterday was more about waste flows. So while there are some construction and demolition materials that are being found illegally dumped, it's not necessarily the larger companies that will be doing that and large projects. It'll probably be small renovations, maybe very small companies. So waste flow for construction and demolition materials, more about how the tipping fees are set in general, and people might send things to Metro Vancouver, or for a while, Metro Vancouver stuff was coming up this way. And so that's where harmonizing the tipping fees across the region and then working with neighboring regional districts will help. But in terms of illegal dumping, there's not necessarily such a strong correlation with the tipping fees, but Tamara had done some interviews with the other regional districts, so I'll let her respond to that too.
Yes, we were also quite interested in learning more about that potential correlation or not. And what we found overwhelmingly across regional districts is that they, the places that had either didn't have tipping fees yet or went from having none to having some, found that there was no major change in illegal dumping behaviors. It was all the other variables, more so that Sue's already spoken to. The only time where there would be a little bit of a blip is if a specific product changed, like mattresses, right? Because then there's that short term, oh, now we need to pay. And again, extended producer responsibility programs can help to mitigate that, and also having a communications campaign that it handles any short term shifts is important. But in terms of broader trends, they're like, this has happened in the past, this is still happening. We need to have people be accountable for the materials that they're handling and deal with the end of life management responsibly. That was the main takeaway.
Thank you. I think in terms of the priorities, I think Mary, you wanted to just chime in.
Yeah, through the chair, I can touch base a little bit on the priorities. It would really depend on staff capacity. So that will be the key driver. As it says in the report, they suggest to have a 0.5 position. So if we were to have that, and staff would bring a report to the board early 2023 in regards of that. But in terms of capacity, that would really drive us what we can and cannot do in terms of priorities. Obviously, the coalition will be a great one, but if staff don't have the capacity to drive that, we'll have to set that aside and see what can be done with the capacity we currently have.
Great. I have a speakers list. I'll go to Director Elliott, then Director Birch Jones, then Director Mack, then Director Wheat, and anyone else after that. Go ahead, Director Elliott.
One of the challenges that we have is that it's expensive to go and get abandoned vehicles like RVs and cars. And one of the things that Director Demare and I advocated for with the minister was to set up something similar to what the federal government has done with abandoned boats. And I'm wondering if you're aware of any work at the provincial level. We're not the only regional district struggling with abandoned RVs and automobiles. And if you're aware of any movement at the provincial level to perhaps look at introducing a similar program as the abandoned boats one.
I haven't heard about that because the province did release their sort of 5-year intention plan around EPR, which tended to focus on mattresses and box springs, electric vehicle batteries, and analysis for the institutional, commercial, and industrial packaging and printed paper is kind of their next set of focus areas. But in 2009, BC had signed on to the Canada-wide action plan on EPR, which had included having some sort of system for automotive. So it didn't say RVs and campers, but I kind of think that advocating for an EPR program for those materials, particularly in this area where we do have so many people that live in them for a while and then just leave them entirely, would be good. And I had heard from one person I interviewed that ICBC has a special investigations unit that had assisted with a cleanup that they had done many years ago in Vanderhoof. And so I had reached out to ICBC and I've had a few conversations with them, but the challenges to be able to speak to the right person. But I think that could again be something to continue to follow up on, to say, what is the role of ICBC? There is kind of a law in the books that says the RCMP will help, but they are struggling with capacity as well. But that's where I think having a coalition work together to say, what are the actual rules in place at this time and who has capacity? And if there isn't capacity, then to work with the provincial government to say this is an issue. And also that's where working with the other regional districts helps in terms of saying it's not just an issue here, it'll be an issue likely across the province.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Birch-Jones, go ahead.
Thank you. And I completely enjoyed this report. Actually, I spend a lot of time cleaning up trails and so forth, and I work with the naturalists and we do organized cleanups. It's a great report, and I loved how you did a very good job with connecting with the local people, including me, but some other more key players who know more, and it's reflected here, and I really like that you went to international sources as well. I thought it was a very good. We brought up free dump days on a number of occasions that seemed to work well in Lillooet when it happened. I think a couple of times a year might be one way to get some of those bigger items into the landfill and not into the wilderness. And I thought, reading through this, like to have some sort of ongoing arrangement with some of the groups that are already, the volunteer groups are already doing some of this work, like Pemberton Wildlife Association is outstanding. The Lillooet Naturalists do quite a bit, and there's other groups. And it is a bit of a pain to apply for a form so that you can dump your trucks on that particular river cleanup day, for example. Get the form and have the right person have the form, and it has to be signed off by our CAO, which is kind of, this is pretty high level stuff here. And then the right attendant has to be on with the right guy with the right, it just is, could we just have, like, this is a recognized group that should be allowed to have free dumping of garbage whenever they show up, essentially, as far as little, if it's a Pemberton Wildlife Association, I think they have a good enough track record that they should be clear to filling out forms and having all of that administrative complications going on, and just recognize them and keep track of how much they're actually bringing in and dumping. And these guys should be part of the coalition. And I think we should get everything that Comox Valley's got and just adopt it for the SLRD. They're obviously doing an outstanding job. And when the part-time staff, I see you guys know the area and the bylaw people, but so does the wild safe coordinator, and maybe they're already out on the land. And so I see an opportunity there. I also really appreciated how complicated, for example, that one RV that we cleaned up in Area B last year, flipping hours of work by volunteers, not a whole lot of charging at the tipping, which we covered from Area B Select, but it was, the process was quite complicated. And that was just one RV. It's quite a mess out there, at least in B for vehicles and RVs. That is, you've identified, that's a big problem. I'm quite happy in Area B to use some of the select funds to help some of the volunteer groups with some of the actual work they do, but I see that we should have a role at the SLRD in coordination, and I appreciate what you're saying about a coalition and a part-time staff, and we should be part of that coalition, but not entirely responsible for it. So yeah, thank you. My comments.
Thank you. Director Mack.
Thank you. So at the Divine Transfer Station, we have had what now for, I guess this is the third year, the metal bins.
Yes.
So we started putting metal bins, like the big bins there, and it's free to bring your old stuff like appliances, rusty car frames, anything that you've got. So people have been, we've actually got now that we're doing 2 in the spring and 2 in the fall, because they get filled right up. So the amount of stuff that we've brought in from that whole Birkin, Divine, Darcy area, Blackwater and everywhere, I would think is quite amazing actually in tonnage. And it works out really good. So what we've been doing is using Area C select funds for that. And I think it's a great program, but the thing, it's $750 per bin, is it? Something to that effect.
It's $400 per bin, and then we get some of the money back
For
through the
tonnage.
middle price.
Yeah, so there's a recovery. So the bin comes in, you pay for it, and then when it ships out, they pay you money back for the amount of metal that you've collected. So that works out really good. And like I say, the amount of material that we've collected out throughout that area in the last 3 years is amazing. And as soon as the bin's filled, I'm getting calls from people saying, when's the next bin coming? And I know I drive these guys crazy because then of course I'm phoning them saying, when's the next bin coming, right? But no, it's a really good program. And I'm sure that if that was done in other areas, you would have the same effect. So something to think about. But thanks, great report and good talking to you. Thank you.
Through the chair, just in regards of the metal, Divine Transfer Station was the only facility within the SRD area that didn't have any metal collection. So that's when I was able to bring that for a really minimum cost. That was a great program and I received great support. But yeah, that was a very special situation. Because in Goldbridge and Lillooet in Pemberton, we do accept metal. Car carcasses and vehicles is a very, very hard issue. With like area D, area C, you can bring your old vehicle to ASM scrap metal in Squamish, but there's a cost for that as well. But there's few solutions here and there, but it's not an easy one. And we have been successful in Area C working with the conservation officer for one of the campers that was in the Wedgwood area that was sitting there for a very, very long time. So that was a really great example of success working together in terms of they didn't know what to do with the garbage left, but they knew what to do with the campers. And I was like, that is perfect because I know what to do with garbage. But the camper for me is a little bit of a bigger issue. So together we were able to clean the site. And we need a little bit more of that for sure. But we just need to keep working at it.
Just to say that the proper word for a dead car is probably corpse, because carcass is the word for a dead fish on the side of the river.
Thank you.
I just learned this.
There's so few language issues on my end.
I have Director Weave and then Director Rako.
Okay, I'm once again going to bring up the access to the landfill, hours of operation. My husband does work for Lillooet Disposal. So sometimes he's doing those big container bins. Sometimes he's doing the compactor out of Goldbridge. Sometimes he's just doing residential garbage. Depending on whether he's in town, out of town, there are times that they could bring in 5-10 bins from various different areas. And by the time they get to town, the landfill is closed. Now those bins sit in their east yard and tomorrow they're off doing something else and they may or may not have time to do those. Then they run out of access to empty bins and it just goes on and on and on. And I've also heard from constituents in town who are working people that, okay, want to go up to recycling, want to go up to the landfill to get rid of our yard waste. I have to be at work at 8 o'clock. They don't open until 11 until 4. And people are working 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. And it's just, yeah, it's crazy. I don't know what you can do. I know you only have so much money for so many hours of operation. But I know that the residential garbage in Lillooet is picked up on Tuesdays and the landfill is closed. So that sits in a truck. They have to then use a different truck the next day to go about doing the commercial garbage. So I think it's really something to look at. And when you look at the large contractors like Lillooet Disposal, they have the capacity to deal with it, sort of. And sometimes they run out of bins. But if you're looking at smaller contractors that maybe have one pickup truck or one 5-ton or whatever, and they're starting work at 8 o'clock on a different job or the same job, but that truck is full. What do they do? Like, they don't have the capacity, and I'm not saying it's okay to illegally dump. I'm just saying it should be something that we look at, our hours of operation and the access, whether, yeah. So I'll keep beating on you for that one.
Gently, gently. I have Director Rainbow, then Director Crompton, then Director Demare.
Yep. I'm sort of grappling here with the costs involved here and how we might pay for them and the fact that it's a regional problem. It's not just a regional district. You know, it's a problem for the municipalities as well. I'm sure they have illegal dumping within a municipality, but I'm also pretty certain that not all of the stuff that ends up in the electoral areas comes from residents of the electoral areas. So we seem at the moment to have sort of an ad hoc approach to it. Russell's put some select funds into it. Vivian's put some select funds. And I think we probably need to, well, I think what we need to do is look at more of a regional source of funding, which would involve the regional district and the municipalities coming together to create the source of funds that we need. And you know, again, we could have a bylaw, the municipalities can have bylaws. We need to enforce them. And so that whatever funding we put into place is going to need to provide the staff that we need to follow up on some of this. You know, I can complain, I can identify somebody that dumped illegally. So what at the moment? You know, we don't really have the tools to deal with it. So I don't really have a solution other than to just raise those issues. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Director Crompton, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for the report. I thought it was really useful in the precision of the direction to us, and I look forward to seeing what staff brings back. I agree with Director Elliott on the aspect of abandoned vehicles. And I think that it's good that when we take on actions ourselves and agree to spend money ourselves, that where there is provincial jurisdiction, that we can add advocacy to, we do it, so that we can go into those meetings and say, this is the work we're doing and here's the help that we need from you. And so I like the coalition concept, and I hope to see us as a body join that decision when it comes back in 2023 with a commitment to advocacy for the province to pick up their cost. Thanks for the presentation. I thought it was great.
Thank you. And Director Demare, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. And I've got a few comments to make, and then we'll go from there. Prior to even becoming a director, you know, I was involved in a number of situations where illegal dumping was taking place. And specifically around the time that the SLRD put on the transfer station videos, if you look at the Goldbridge transfer station, you'll see me, I participated in that one. And one thing I've learned is that we're quite remote. So the illegal dumping is the property owners. When people are doing some new construction, you see it. They'll take piles and piles of dirt and roots and tree stumps and dump them in landings, and the list goes on and on. People are renovating, they don't want to take it to the transfer station, they'll put it in landings. And there was one incident right near the outflow of Gun Creek or Gun Lake, where there was a landing, an older landing, and people just kept on dumping and dumping. Eventually, somebody tore down a whole cabin and dumped it there. And in the winter, they burned it. It's in that video if you want to look at it, the Goldbridge Transfer Station video. So I worked with the forest company that had the tenure, and I got them to ditch the access road to that landing. Within 2 days, somebody at the lake with a bobcat went and filled the ditch in again. We had the SLRD put up 2 signs with concrete at the base of them, one in Goldbridge where there's an issue area, and that area there. Within a couple of weeks, they were ripped out and gone, concrete and everything, just taken away. So you can see what the issues are, and it's definitely throughout our valley because of all these access roads and forestry roads and landings, the list goes on and on. So I've worked with the forest companies, and just recently they did a whole bunch of cut blocks on the way to between Goldbridge and Braylord, and a constituent there, Race and Heck. We had the grizzly bear shooting on one of them this year. 2 years ago, we had a young moose shot and left there, and people dumping debris in there. And I worked with that forest company, was actually BC Timber Sales, and finally we've got those roads all blocked off now. So the whole concept of, so to me, I think one of the primary ones is that coalition. That's important. And if we had that part-time staff for each electoral area, or whether it's the Sea to Sky area or Lillooet area, Seton Portage area, our area, facilitate sessions to build that coalition with all the various ministries that are out there, all the rec sites and trails, and the list goes on and on. The forest companies, the tenure holders, community groups, etc., to build that coalition. Everybody's on the same wavelength, so that when these cut blocks and landings are created, that they're all deactivated, so that nobody can get back into them. If they're not going to go log there again, they need to be deactivated right after they do their tree planting, which is they have to do in 2 years, and just start deactivating them. So kind of limiting the access, but then it'll bring a big profile to this issue. So to me, that would be a really good step to take, is having a part-time staff that would coordinate these, even if it's on contract, just for a short time, to create that coalition. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Demare. I don't have anyone else on my speakers list. Was there any other comments or questions for the presentation? Seeing none, my only question or potential comment, I think it's already been raised, is we haven't put forward a formal resolution to the province. Do you think an EPR resolution on RVs and complicated? So what I've heard from different people is that an RV has not only metal and fabric, but it's also got Freon and refrigeration and all kinds of other complicated materials that can't easily be removed without extraordinary cost. And with all of the RVs and campers that were built in the 70s are effectively coming to the end of their useful life and can't really be restored much longer, that is a huge piece of work that needs to be understood. And I know that Karen already mentioned that we did bring this forward to the minister meeting last year or 2 years ago. Shall we continue that advocacy and work with other regional districts to put together a resolution for UBCM? Obviously not this year, but in next year, I think.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. And I think We've already identified some of the regional districts that are working on illegal dumping, and so those might be some good ones to start with. And I would be happy to help you as well through the Climate Caucus. We have a working group that has developed resolutions as well. So yeah, I think that would be a great idea.
Okay.
And I'm just thinking what you were saying about the recreational vehicles. I mean, we have a levy on tires now. When you buy tires, there's a levy that goes into some sort of fund for recycling the tires. So, you know, whose responsibility is the dismantling and disposal of an old RV? And maybe we should reach back to the manufacturer, so that the original sale, somewhere to take some money, which would go into a provincial fund, which we would then be able to access, because there's a business there waiting to be created. But it shouldn't be up to an entrepreneur to take a risk with his money. We should be structuring the sale and use of RVs to create that kind of a fund.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there's some of that stuff, yeah, it's costly to get it out, but it's usable again.
Right.
You know, so
yeah. Okay. We have a potential resolution. Did you want? Sorry, I haven't.
Yeah, it's horrible writing too. So the draft resolution is that staff further refine the information provided today, considering board input, and develop prioritized action and associated costs for board consideration in advance of the 2023 budget deliberations.
Great. Beautiful.
I'll move that.
Moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Weave. Any comments? Seeing anybody on the screen? No? All right. I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was great.
Did you want a resolution regarding that advocacy piece?
I think that's just work ongoing, and we will allow staff to come back with a resolution or work on that. Yeah. Thanks, Sue. Great to see you. Nice to Thank you, Tamara, for being here online with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Great, thank you very much.
We had a couple of bags of garbage dumped in our garden waste bin, and one of them had broken open, and there was some mail in there.
Oh.
Yeah. So we took a look, it had the address, name and address. So somebody in our community, who shall remain nameless, delivered those 2 bags of garbage back to their front door.
Perfect.
Good way to do it.
Companies have that happen too, where they climb the fence at the east yard, where they park those bins and trucks and put electronic things in them. So if someone else is paying to dispose of this stuff, which should have been recycled, right? And yeah, it's becoming a problem everywhere, I think.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, everyone, for that. Next on the list is the chair's verbal update. Viv, I'm putting you on the spot. You attended a meeting with Minister Farnworth the other day regarding the heat event. And do you want to do a quick report back to the board on anything that you can share?
No surprise to any of you. I can confirm that it's hot. And that there will be heat warnings issued. The one thing, and I did remember to tell Craig, first of all, it was very well attended, and it was Madeline who does more of the emergency, and I'm sorry, I can't remember her last name, but this is what I was focusing on, was the emergency management of BC will reimburse municipalities, I believe, is who she was referencing, but I'm sure regional districts, but it's most appropriate for municipalities. Their extra costs of the cooling center. And so not only the sort of extra staff time that would be required, the cost of having the facility open and the signage and the advertising, but they also mentioned transporting of clients to and from cooling centers. But all of this, of course, would have to be negotiated up front with Emergency Management BC, and then they could be reimbursed after the fact. So I thought that was the sort of the one comment that I brought back to Craig. Otherwise, I mean, we all know that we've got some record-breaking temperatures and all the rest of it. So I won't bore you with that.
Yeah, the trigger for these centers being open or this heat emergency being declared is if temperatures exceed 29 degrees during the day and 16 degrees overnight. So if it doesn't get lower than 16 for 3 consecutive days. So that's sort of the best practice that UNBC is working with. And a lot of work has gone into what sorts of supports should be available in communities to ensure that people have a cool place to go, places to access water and just a cool space during the day. But I think the big messaging around who to look out for and how to care for our neighbors during this time is really, really important. So.
The death rate from the heat wave last year was actually pretty significant. And I think because of all of the other simultaneous crises that were going on, at least in my corner of the world, I didn't really attend that number at the time, but it was over 600 people that they're correlating with that heat wave. And so those delays in getting to care. Lytton's gonna break its own record here today, and they don't have that fire under control. So the weekend looks pretty challenging for temperatures and management.
That's great. Director Mack, did you?
Yeah, so I guess having said that our community center, it would be on that the list of places people could go.
Which community center are you?
Well, the Pemberton district, so, I mean, I know the village there, they manage it, but obviously they're aware of this whole
Yes.
program.
Yeah, and our emergency management folks are working hand in hand with their partners in the municipalities and pushing that information out on our website and our communications means.
Because for people in, say, you know, the vicinity of that community center, it's great, but if people like in Birken or Devine or Darcy or down the lake or up the valley, you know, found themselves in a situation and they needed to get to a cooling center, there's a challenge getting there, right? So that's something we need to, you know, be aware of too. We could have people in the outlying areas, and this goes for everywhere in the regional district. People in outlying areas could be compromised for sure.
I'll go to Director Demare, then Director Birch-Jones.
Thank you. Like Russell is correct. I don't know if anybody's got air conditioning up in our valley. And it'd be good to have, because we do have a lot of seniors, it would be good to have at least one facility with air conditioning. I wonder if staff could look at funding opportunities for at least making one community, whether it's in the Goldbridge area. It's always the hottest, of course, because it's right down, it's got the lowest level. And maybe it's the, you know, the library, the SLRD library.
Yeah, through the chair, I think that we're clearly going to have to continue to evolve our approach to heat events as they become more frequent and more severe, and so we'll do that, and we'll, you know, we'll keep the board apprised of what that work produces. But clearly, the some of the communication that's gone out this week based on learnings from the heat dome last year in terms of what to look for in terms of vulnerable individuals, and just some of the what might seem like rather obvious suggestions are not obvious, or as you say, available to people in some of the rural areas. So I think we definitely need to continue to evolve how we approach heat events outside of sort of small urban centers. So we'll do that for certain.
Thank you.
And Director Birch-Jones?
Just to follow up on my report, I actually did make some notes, and I'm remembering now that last evening I saw on the email, there was an update on the UBCM newsletter, and it covered the call and the resources quite well. So for my inadequate report, there's better follow-up. But Mike Farnworth was the lead on it. Nathan Cullen's office was the one that organized it, but he wasn't on the call. Adrian Dix was on the call, and Dr. Sarah Henderson from the CDC. And they did, I'm just looking at of course, we have a heat warning in effect and all the vulnerability stuff. They also mentioned the cost of water along with the wages and the transportation and the cost of the opening centers. And the fact that they have very strategically placed crews around the province in anticipation of the wildfire risk because it's just climbing. And they made a point of saying that it's Environment Canada that issues the warnings and that they have a lot of references and information and resources on Emergency BC site. To complete my report. Thank you
very much. With that, can I have someone move that we receive the report? Moved by Director Max, seconded by Director Lieb. Any further comment? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And there was no late business for today. So could I have someone move adjournment of this committee of the whole, moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Birch Jones. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. We'll now go back to our open board meeting. And can I have someone move that we go into closed? Are we at that point? No, Director Clark, go ahead.
Thank you. So item 15 is recommendations from the committee of the whole. So just a resolution to adopt the illegal dumping resolution from this morning, please.
Okay, so moved, Director Rainbow, second by Director Birch Jones. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now, a resolution to go into closed. Moved by Director Max, seconded by Director Birch Jones. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do you want to chair here?